It's another day in paradise. This is knowledge time. Welcome, alchemists. Today I'll be reading from the book The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. This episode is chapter 3, part 3, and it begins. Decoding Keys. Remember that people are generally trying to present the best possible front to the world. This means concealing their possible and antagonistic feelings, their desires for power or superiority, their attempts at ingratitude, and their insecurities. They will use words to hide their feelings and distract you from the reality, playing on people's verbal fixations. They will also use certain facial expressions that are easy to put on and that people assume mean friendliness. Your task is to look past the distractions and become aware of those signs that leak out automatically, revealing something of the true emotion beneath the mask. The three categories of the most important cues to observe and identify are dislike, like, dominance, submission, and deception. Dislike, like cues. Imagine the following scenario. Someone in a group dislikes you, whether out of envy or mistrust, but in a group environment, they cannot express this overtly or they will look bad, not a team player. And so they smile at you, engage you in conversation, and even seem to support your ideas. At times you might feel something is not quite right, but the signs are subtle, and you forget them as you pay attention to the front they present. They suddenly, as if out of the blue, they obstruct you or display an ugly attitude. The mask has come off. The price you pay is not only difficulties in your work or personal life, but also the emotional toll, which can have a lingering effects. Understand, people's hostile or resistant actions never come out of the blue. There are always signs before they take any action. It is too much of a strain for them to completely suppress such strong emotions. The problem is not only that we are not paying attention, but also that we are inherently do not like the thought of conflict or disagreement. We prefer to avoid thinking about it and to assume that people are on our side or at least neutral. Most often we feel something is not quite right with the other person, but ignore the feeling. We must learn to trust such intuitive responses and to look for those signs that should trigger a closer examination of the evidence. People give out clear indications in their body language of active dislike or hostility. These include the sudden squinting of the eyes at something you have said, the glare, the pursuing of the lips until they nearly disappear, the stiff neck, the torso or feet that turn away from you while you are still engaged in a conversation, the folding of the arms as you try to make a point, and overall tenseness in the body. The problem is that you will not usually see such signs unless a person's displeasure has become too strong to conceal at all. Instead, you must train yourself to look for the micro expressions and the other more subtle signs that people give out. The micro expression is a recent discovery among psychologists who have been able to document its existence through film. It lasts less than a second. There are two varieties of this. The first comes when people are aware of a negative feeling and try to suppress it, but it leaks out in a fraction of a second. The other comes when we are unaware of their hostility and yet it shows itself in quick flashes on the face or in the body. These expressions will be momentarily glare, tenting of the facial muscles, pursuing of the lips, the beginnings of a frown or sneer or look of contempt, with the eyes looking down. Aware of this phenomena, we can look for these expressions. You will be surprised at how often they occur. because it is nearly impossible to completely control the facial muscles and repress the signs in time. You must be relaxed and attentive, not obviously looking for them, but catching them out of the corner of your eye. Once you begin to notice such expressions, you will find it easier to catch them. Equally eloquent Equally eloquent are those signs that are subtle but can last for several seconds, revealing tension and coldness. For instance, when you first approach someone who harbors negative thoughts toward you, if you surprise them by coming up on them from an angle, you will clearly see signs of displeasure at your approach before they have had time to fit on their fallible mask. They are not so happy to see you, and it shows for a second or two. Or you are expressing a strong opinion and their eyes begin to roll, which they try to quickly cover up with a smile. Sudden silence can say a lot. You have said something that triggers a twinge of envy or dislike, and they cannot help but lapse into silence and broad. They may try to hide this with a smile as they inwardly fume, as opposed to simple shyness or having nothing to say. You will detect def- definite signs of irritation. In this case, it is best to notice this a few times before coming to any conclusions. People will often give themselves away with the mixed signal, a positive comment to distract you, but some clearly negative body language. This offers them relief from the tension of always having to be pleasant. They are betting on the fact that you will tend to focus on the words and gloss over the grimace or lopsided smile. Pay attention as well to the opposite configuration. Someone says something sarcastic and pointed, directed at you, but they do this with a smile and a jokey tone of voice, as if to signal it is all in good humor. It would be impolite to not take it in this vein, but in fact, particularly in this occurs a few times. You should pay attention to the words and not the body language. It is their repressed way of expressing their hostility. Take notice of people who praise or flatter you without their eyes lighting up. This could be a sign of hidden envy. In the novel The Charterhouse of Parma by Stella, Count Mosca receives an anonymous letter designed to stir up jealous feelings about his mistress, whom he is desperately in love with. And thinking over who would who could have sent it, he recalls a conversation earlier that day with the Prince of Parma. The prince was talking about how the pleasures of power pale in comparison with the pleasures afforded by love. And as he said this, the count detected a particular malicious glint in his eyes, accompanied by an ambiguous smile. The words were about love in general, but the look was directed at him. From that, he correctly deduced that the prince had sent the letter. He could not completely contain his venomous glee at what he had done, and it had leaked out. This is a variation of the mixed signal. People say something relatively strong about a general topic, but with subtle looks they point at you. An excellent gauge for decoding antagonism is to compare people's body language toward you and toward others. You might detect that they are noticeably friendlier and warmer toward other people, and then put on a polite mask with you. In a conversation, they cannot help showing brief flashes of impatience and irritation in their eyes, but only when you talk. Also keep in mind that people will tend to leak out more of their true feelings, and certainly hostile ones, when they are drunk, sleepy, frustrated, angry, or under stress. They will later tend to excuse this as if they weren't themselves for the moment, but in fact they were actually being more themselves than ever. In looking for these signs, one of the best methods is to set up tests, even traps for people. King Louis the 14th was a master of this. He stood at the top of a court in Versailles filled with members of the nobility seething with hostility and resentment toward him and the absolute authority he was trying to impose. But in the civilized realm of Versailles, they all had to be consummate actors and hide their feelings, particularly toward the king. Louis had his ways, however, of testing them. He would suddenly appear in their presence without warning and look for the immediate expressions on their faces. He would request a nobleman to move himself and his family to the place of Versailles, knowing that this was costly and unpleasant. He carefully observed any signs of annoyance in the face or voice. He would say something negative about another courtier, an ally of theirs, and notice their immediate reaction. Enough signs of discomfort indicated secret hostility. If you suspect someone of feeling envy, talk about the latest good news for you without appearing to brag. Look for micro expressions of disappointment on their face. Use similar tests to probe for hidden anger and resentments, eliciting the responses that people cannot suppress so quickly. In general, people will want to see more of you, want to see less of you, or be rather indifferent. They may fluctuate among the three states, but they will tend to veer toward one. They will reveal this in how quickly they respond to your emails or texts, their body language on first seeing you, and the overall tone they take in your presence. The true value in detecting possible hostility or negative feelings early on is that it increases your strategic options and room to maneuver. You can lay a trap for people in intentionally stirring their hostility and goading them into some aggressive action that will embarrass them in the long run. Or you can work doubly hard to neutralize their dislike of you and even win them over through a charm offensive. Or you can simply create distance, not hiring them, firing them, refusing to interact with them. In the end, you will make your path much smoother by avoiding surprise battles and acts of sabotage. On the other side of the coin, we generally have less of a need to hide positive emotions from others. But nonetheless, we often do not like to admit obvious signs of joy and attraction, especially in work situations or even in courtship. People often prefer to display a cool social front. So there is a great value in being able to detect the signs that people are falling under your spell. According to research, studies on facial cues by psychologists such as Paul Ekman, E.H. Hess, and others, people who feel positive emotions for you will display noticeable signs of relaxation in the facial muscles, particularly in the lines of the forehead and the area around the mouth. Their lips will appear more fully exposed and the whole area around their eyes will widen. These are all involuntary expressions of comfort and openness. In the feelings are more intense, such as if the feelings are more intense, such as falling in love, blood rushes to the face, animating all of the features. As part of this excited state, the pupils will dilate, an automatic response in which the eyes let in more light. It is a sure sign that a person is comfortable and likes what they are seeing. Along with the dilation, the eyebrows will rise, making the eyes look even bigger. We do not usually pay attention to eye pupils because looking intently into another's eyes has an overly sexual cognition. We must train ourselves to glance quickly at the pupils when we notice any widening of the eyes. In developing your skills in this area, you must learn to distinguish between the fake and the genuine smile. In trying to hide our negative feelings, we most often resort to the fake smile because it is easy and people generally do not pay attention to the subtleties of smiles. Because the genuine variety is less common, you must know how to recognize it. The genuine smile will affect the muscles around the eyes and widen them, often revealing crow's feet on the sides of the eyes. It will It will also tend to pull the cheeks upward. There is no genuine smile without a definite change in the eyes and cheeks. Some people will try to create the impression of the genuine variety by putting on a very broad smile, which will partially alter the eyes as well. So, in addition to the physical signs, you must look at the context. The genuine smile usually comes from some action or words that suddenly elicit the response. It is spontaneous. Is a smile in this case somewhat unrelated to the circumstances, not not warranted by what was said? Is it a situation in which a person is straining to impress or has strategic goals in mind? Is the timing of the smile slightly off? Perhaps the most telling indication of positive emotion comes from the voice. It is much easier for us to control the face. We can we can look in a mirror for such purposes, but unless we are professional actors, the voice is very difficult to consciously modulate. When people are engaged and excited to talk to you, the pitch of their voice rises, indicating emotional arousal. Even if people are nervous, the tone of the voice will be warm and natural, as opposed to the simulated warmth of a salesman. You can detect an almost spurring quality to the voice, with which some have likened to a vocal smile. You will notice also an absence of tension and hesitation. In the course of a conversation, there is a equal level of banter, with the pace quickening, indicating increasing rapport. A voice that is animated and happy tends to infect us with the mood and elicit a similar response. We know it when we feel it, but often we ignore these feelings and instead concentrate on the friendly words or sales pitch. Finally, monitoring nonverbal cues is essential in your attempts at influencing and seducing people. It is the best way to gauge the degree to which a person is falling under your spell. When people start to feel comfortable in your presence, they will stand closer to you or lean in, their arms not folded or revealing any tension. If you are giving a talk or telling a story, frequent head nods, attentive gazes, and genuine smiles will indicate that people agree with what you are saying and are losing their resistance. They exchange more looks. Perhaps the best and most exciting sign of all is synchrony. The other person unconsciously mirroring you. Their legs cross in the same direction. The head tilts in a similar manner, one smile inducing another. At the deepest level of synchrony, as Milton Erickson discovered, you will find breathing patterns falling into the same rhythm, which can sometimes end in the complete synchrony synchrony of a kiss. You can also train yourself to not only monitor these changes that show your influence, but induce them as well by displaying positive cues yourself. You begin to slowly stand or lean closer, revealing subtle signs of openness. You nod and smile as others talk. You mirror their behavior and their breathing patterns. As you do so, you watch for signs of emotional infection, going further only when you detect the slow crumbling of resistance. With expert seducers who use all of the positive cues to mimic the appearance that they are falling in love, only to bring you more deeply under their control. Keep in mind that very few people naturally reveal so much emotion so early on. If your supposed effect on them seems a bit too rushed or perhaps contrived, tell them to slow down and monitor their face for micro expressions of frustration. Dominance submission Dominant submission cues. As the most complex social animal on the planet, we humans form elaborate hierarchies based on position, money, and power. We are aware of these hierarchies, but we do not like talking explicitly about relative power positions. And we are genuinely uncomfortable when others talk about their superior rank. Instead, signs of dominance or weakness are more often expressed in nonverbal communication. We have inherited this communication style from other primates, notably chimpanzees, who have elaborate signals to denote an individual chimp's place in the social rank. Keep in mind that the feeling of being in a superior social position gives people a confidence that will radiate outward in their body language. Some feel this confidence before they attain a position of power, and it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy as others are drawn to them. Some who are ambitious might try to simulate these cues, but it has to be done well. Fake confidence can be quite off putting. Confidence usually comes with a greater feeling of relaxation that is clearly reflected in the face, and with a greater freedom of movement. Those who are powerful will feel allowed to look around more at others, choosing to make eye contact with whomever they please. Their eyelids are more closed, a sign of seriousness and competence. If they feel bored or annoyed, they show it more freely and openly. They often smile less, frequent smiling being a sign of overall insecurity. They feel more entitled to touch people, such as with friendly pats on the back or on the arm. In a meeting, they will tend to take up more space and create more distance around themselves. They stand taller and their gestures are relaxed and comfortable. Most important, others feel compelled to imitate their style and mannerisms. The leader will tend to impose a form of nonverbal communication on the group in very subtle ways. You will notice people mimicking not only their ideas but also their calm or more frenetic energy. Alpha males like to signal their superior position in the rank in several ways. They speak faster than others and feel entitled to interrupt and control the flow of the conversation. Their handshake is extra vigorous, almost crushing. When they walk in the office, you will see them assume a taller stance and purposeful stride, generally making inferiors walk behind them. Watch chimpanzee in a zoo, and you will notice similar behavior on the part of the alpha chimp. For women in leadership positions, what often works best is a calm, confident expression, warm yet businesslike. Perhaps the best example of this would be current German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Her smile are even her smiles are even less frequent than the average male politician, but when they occur, they are especially meaningful. They never seem fake. She listens to others with looks of complete absorption, her face remarkably still. Excuse me. She has a way of getting others to do most of the talking while always seeming to be in control of the course of the conversation. She does not need to interrupt to assert herself. When she wants to attack someone, it is with looks of boredom, iceness, or contempt, never with blustery words. When Russian President Vladimir Putin tried to intimidate her by bringing his pet dog into a meeting, knowing Merkel had once been bitten and had a fear of dogs, she visibly tensed, then quickly composed herself and looked him calmly in the eye. She put herself in the one-up position in relation to Putin by not making anything of his ploy. He seemed rather childish and petty in comparison. Her style does not include all of the alpha male body posturing. It is quieter and yet extremely powerful in its own way. As women come to attain more leadership position, this less obtrusive style of authority might begin to alter out perception of some of the dominance cues so long associated with power. It is worth observing those in positions of power in your group for signs of dominance cues or for their absence. Leaders who display tension and hesitation in their nonverbal cues are generally insecure in their power and feel it threatened. Signs of such anxiety and insecurity are generally easy to spot. They will talk in a more halting manner, with long pauses. Their voice will rise in pitch and stay there. They will tend to avert their gaze and control their eye movements, although they will often blink more. They will put on more focused smiles and emit nervous laughs, as opposed to feeling entitled to touch others. They will tend to touch themselves in what is known as pacifying behavior. They will touch their hair, their neck, their forearm, all in an attempt to soothe their nerves. People trying to hide their insecurities will assert themselves a little too loudly in a conversation, their voices rising. As they do this, they look around nervously, eyes wide open, or as they talk in an animated way, their hands and bodies are unusually still, always a sign of anxiety. They will inevitably give off mixed signals, and you must pay greater attention to those that signal underlying insecurity. Nicolas Sarkozy, a president of France 2017 to 2012, was someone who liked to assert his presence through body language. He would pat people on the back, be the one to direct them where to stand, fix them with his stare, interrupt what they were saying, and generally try to dominate the room. During one meeting with him in the midst of the Euro crisis, Chancellor Merkel saw his unusual domineering act, but could not help but notice his foot nervously jingling the entire time. The extra assertive style was perhaps his way of distracting others from his insecurities. This was valuable information Merkel could put to use. People's actions will often contain dominance and submission cues. For instance, people will often show up late to indicate their superiority, real or imagined. They are not obligated to be on time. Also, conversation patterns reveal the relative position people feel they occupy. For instance, those who feel dominant will tend to talk more and interrupt frequently as a means of asserting themselves. When there's an argument that turns personal, they will resort to what is known as punctuation. They will find an action on the other side that started it all. Even though clearly it is part of the relationship pattern, they assert their interpretation of who is to blame through their tone of voice and piercing looks. If you observe a couple from the outside, you will frequently notice one person who is in the dominant position. If you converse with them, the dominant one will make eye contact with you, but not with his or her partner, and will appear to only half listen to what the partner says. Smiles can also be a subtle cue for indicating superiority, especially through what we shall call the tight smile. This usually comes in response to something someone said, and it is a smile that tightens the facial muscles and indicates irony and contempt for the person they see as inferior, but gives them the cover of appearing friendly. One final but very subtle nonverbal means of asserting dominance in a relationship comes through the symptom. One partner suddenly develops headaches or some other illness, or starts drinking, or generally falls into a negative pattern of behavior. This forces the other side to play by their rules, to tend to their weaknesses. It is the willful use of sympathy to gain power, and it is extremely effective. Finally, use the knowledge you glean from these cues as a valuable means of gauging the levels of confidence in people and acting appropriately. With leaders who are riddled with insecurities that poke through non-verbally, you can play to their insecurities and gain power through this. But often it is best to avoid attaching yourself too closely to such types, as they tend to do poorly over time and can drag you down with them. With those who are not leaders but are trying to assert themselves as if they were, your response should depend on their personality type. If they are rising stars, full of self-belief and a sense of destiny, it might be wise to try to rise with them. You will notice such types by the positive energy that surrounds them. On the other hand, if they are simply arrogant and petty despots, there are precisely the types you should always strive to avoid, as they are masters of making others pay line-up service to them without giving anything in return. Deception cues. We humans are by nature quite gullible. We want to believe in certain things, that we can get something for nothing, that we can easily regain or rejuvenate our health thanks to some new trick, perhaps even cheat death, that most people are essentially good and can be trusted. This propensity is what deceivers and manipulators thrive on. It would be immensely beneficial for the future of our species if we were all less gullible. But we cannot change human nature. Instead, the best we can do is to learn to recognize certain telltale signs of an attempt at deception and maintain our skepticism as we examine the evidence further. The most clear and common sign comes when people assume an extra animated front, when they smile a lot, seem more than friendly, and even are quite entertaining. It is hard for us to not be drawn in and lower ever so slightly our resistance to their influence. When Lyndon Johnson was trying to pull the wool over the eyes of a fellow senator, he would go an extra mile with his physical appearance, cornering them in the cloakroom, telling some off-color jokes, touching them on the arm, looking extra sincere, and cracking the biggest smiles he could muster. Similarly, if people are trying to cover something up, they tend to become extra vehement, righteous, and chatty. They are playing on the conviction bias. See chapter 1. If I deny or say something with so much gusto, with an air of being a victim, it is hard to doubt me. We tend to take extra conviction for truth. In fact, when people try to explain their ideas with so much exaggerated energy or defend themselves with an intense level of denial, that is precisely when you should raise your antenna. In both cases, the cover-up and the soft sell, the deceiver is striving to distract you from the truth. Although an animated face and gestures might come from sheer exuberance and genuine friendliness, when they come from someone you don't know well, or from someone who just might have something to hide, you must be on your guard. Now you are looking for nonverbal signs to confirm your suspicions. With such deceivers, you will often notice that one part of the face or the body is more expressive to attract your attention. This will often be the area around the mouth, with large smiles and changing expressions. This is the easiest area of the body for people to manipulate and create an animated effect. But it could also be exaggerated gestures with the hands and arms. The key is that you will detect tension and anxiety in other parts of the body, because it is impossible for them to control all of the muscles. When they flash a big smile, the eyes are tense with little movement, or the rest of the body is unusually still. Or if the eyes are trying to fool you with looks to garner your sympathy, the mouth quivers slightly. There are signs of contrived behavior, or of trying too hard to control one part of the body. Sometimes really clever deceivers will attempt to create the opposite impression. If they are covering up a misdeed, they will hide their guilt behind an extremely serious and competent exterior, the face becoming unusually still. Instead of loud denials, they will offer a highly plausible explanation of the chain of events, even going through the evidence that confirms this. Their picture of reality is nearly seamless. If they are trying to gain your money or support, they will pose as the highly competent professional to the point of being somewhat boring, even hitting you with a lot of numbers and statistics. Con artists often employ this front. The great con artist Victor Lustig would lure his victims to sleep with a professional pattern, making himself come off as a bureaucrat or the dull expert in bonds and securities. Bernie Madoff seemed so bland, nobody could possibly suspect him of such an audacious con game as the one he pulled off. This form of deception is harder to see through because there is less to notice. But once again, you are looking from contrived impressions. Reality is never so pat and seamless. Real events involve sudden random intrusions and accidents. Reality is messy, and the pieces rarely fit so perfectly. That was what was wrong with the Watergate cover-up and raise suspicions. When the explanation or the come-up is just a little too slick or professional, that is what should trigger your skepticism. Looking at this from the other side, as a character in Dostoevsky's novel The Idiot advised, when you are lying, if you skillfully put in something not quite ordinary, something eccentric, something that never has happened or very rarely, it makes the lies sound much more probable. In general, the best thing to do when you suspect people of trying to distract you from the truth is not to actively confront them in the beginning, but in fact to encourage them to continue by showing interest in what they are saying or doing. You want them to talk more, to reveal more signs of tension and contrivance. At the right moment, you must surprise them with a question or remark that is designed to make them uncomfortable, revealing you are onto them. Pay attention to the micro expressions and body language they emit at such moments. If they are really deceiving, they will often have a freeze response as they take this in, and then quickly try to make the underlying anxiety. This was the favorite strategy of Detective Columbo in the television series of the same name, facing criminals who had tried to reverse engineer the evidence to make it look like someone else had done it. Columbo would pretend to be perfectly friendly and harmless, but then would suddenly ask an uncomfortable question and then pay extra attention to the face and body. Even with the most practiced deceivers, one of the best ways to unmask them is to notice how they give emphasis on their words through nonverbal cues. It is very difficult for humans to fake this. Emphasis comes through raised vocal pitch and assertive tone, forceful hand gestures, the raising of eyebrows, and the widening of eyes. We might also lean forward or rise up on the balls of our feet. We engage in such behavior when we are filled with emotion and trying to add an explanation point to what we are saying. It is hard for deceivers to mimic this. The emphasis they place with their voice or body is not exactly correlated to what they are saying, does not quite fit the context of the moment, or comes a little too late. When they pound the table with their fists, it is not at the moment they should be feeling the emotion, but a little earlier, as if on cue, as if to create an effect. There are all cracks in the veneer of the realness they are trying to protect. Finally, with deception, keep in mind that there is always a scale involved. At the bottom of the scale, we find the most harmless varieties, little white lies. These could include all forms of flattery in daily life. You look great today. I love your screenplay. They could include, but they could include not revealing to people exactly what you did that day, or withholding bits of information because it is annoying to be completely transparent and have no privacy. These small forms of deception can be detected if we pay attention, such as by noticing the genuineness of a smile. But in fact, it is best to simply ignore the lower end. Polite, civilized society depends on the ability to say things that are not always sincere. It would be too damaging socially to become constantly aware of this subrealm of, of deception. Save your alertness for those situations in which the stakes are higher and people might be angling to get something valuable out of you. Okay, that's part 3. Tomorrow I'll be reading part 4, The Art of Impression Management. In conclusion, subscribe to the channel, comment any questions you have, like if the information was inspiring for you, and share this knowledge with other alchemists. Also, follow me on Instagram for more progressive knowledge. My Instagram is Max_Bugatti_8008. I'm about family first. I'm an investor in stocks and alternative energy. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an aerospace botanist. I have a confidence building program, and then currently I'm out here on that west side California, San Fran, East Bay. While you're slaying dragons, I'll be taming them.